I can't sit in your class anymore. Not since that day with the baton. When talented 16-year-old Marcus Johnson uttered these words, nobody understood the hidden pain behind his refusal to take a seat in music class. Dismissed as defiant and disruptive, this black student harbored an extraordinary secret, one that would be accidentally discovered when an arrogant music teacher caught him playing violin alone in an empty classroom. What happens when raw talent collides with prejudice? How does a self-taught prodigy survive in a system that values credentials over passion? And what transformation awaits when the very person who caused such pain is forced to confront their own biases? This heartbreaking yet ultimately uplifting story will make you question everything you thought you knew about talent, opportunity, and redemption. Don't miss a single moment of this emotional journey. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson slipped into the empty music room, his dark eyes scanning nervously for any signs of movement. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the dusty blinds, illuminating the array of instruments that sat in perfect formation. His thin fingers trembled slightly as he approached the glass case where the school's violins were kept. Just 15 minutes, he whispered to himself. That's all I need. At 16, Marcus was known as the quiet kid at Roosevelt High, a label that protected him from unwanted attention. Few knew of his passion for music, and even fewer knew why he always stood at the back during Ms. Reynolds' music appreciation class, never taking a seat despite her constant demands. The memory made his back throb with phantom pain. 3 months ago, Ms. Reynolds had struck him with her conductor's baton when he'd disrupted her class by correcting her explanation of a Mozart piece. The humiliation had been worse than the physical pain, but the welts had taken weeks to fade. Sit down, Mr. Johnson, she had snapped that day, her pale face flushed with anger. Or do you think you know more than someone with 2 degrees from Berkeley? When he tried to explain, the baton had come down across his back, making him gasp in front of everyone. Now, Marcus carefully removed a violin from its case, handling it with reverence that Ms. Reynolds had never shown him. He positioned it under his chin without using a shoulder rest, he couldn't afford one of his own to practice with. He drew the bow across the strings, and the instrument came alive. The opening notes of Tchaikovsky's violin concerto filled the room, complex, emotional, and played with a technical precision that would have shocked anyone who knew him only as the silent black kid who refused to sit down in music class. For these stolen moments, there was no pain in his back. No fear of Ms. Reynolds' sharp tongue and sharper baton. No awareness of being one of only 12 black students in a school of 500. There was only the music, flowing through him like something magical. He closed his eyes, swaying slightly as the passionate melody built to its crescendo. The world around him disappeared completely. Which is why he didn't notice when the door to the music room quietly opened. Victoria Reynolds had forgotten her gradebook. Normally, she would never return to school after hours, her time was valuable, after all, but the quarterly grades were due tomorrow. She marched down the empty hallway, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor, mentally rehearsing the lecture she would give tomorrow about responsibility and professionalism. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of Tchaikovsky, played with such emotion that she stopped mid-stride. It was coming from her classroom. Vandals, she hissed, quickening her pace. Roosevelt High had been dealing with a rash of petty theft, and she wasn't about to let some delinquent damage her expensive instruments. But when she pushed open the door, the sight before her froze her in place. Marcus Johnson, the defiant boy who refused to sit properly in her class, who challenged her knowledge with his impertinent questions, who'd had the audacity to complain to the principal when she'd merely disciplined him for disrupting her lesson, was playing her best violin with closed eyes and complete absorption. More shocking still was how he played. His technique wasn't perfect, his elbow was slightly too high, his fingering occasionally unorthodox, but the music was transcendent. There was a raw emotional quality to his playing that she hadn't heard from students with years of formal training. For a moment, Victoria forgot her anger. She simply listened, transfixed, as this boy she dismissed as troublesome performed a piece that professional violinists approached with trepidation. Then reality reasserted itself. He was handling an expensive instrument without permission. He was trespassing after hours. And most unforgivably, he was making her question her judgment. Mr. Johnson. The violin screeched to a discordant halt as Marcus's eyes flew open. The look of terror that crossed his face gave Victoria a familiar sense of satisfaction, quickly followed by an unfamiliar twinge of something else, something that felt uncomfortably like shame. Ms. Reynolds. Marcus fumbled with the violin, nearly dropping it in his panic. I'm sorry, you were just what? Stealing school property? Trespassing? She advanced into the room, watching him shrink back. Where did you learn to play like that? Marcus carefully placed the violin back in its case, his hands still shaking. I taught myself, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. Victoria scoffed. That's impossible. Tchaikovsky's violin concerto requires years of formal training. Who's been teaching you? No one, ma'am. His voice was barely audible. I watch videos online. And sometimes I use the practice rooms at the community center. She circled him like a predator, noting how he winced when he straightened his back. So you're telling me that while you disrupt my class and refuse to participate properly, you've secretly mastered one of the most difficult violin concertos ever written? Do you expect me to believe that? Marcus stood rigid, pain flaring across his back as Ms. Reynolds circled him. Each step she took made him flinch internally, memories of the baton striking him vivid in his mind. Answer me, Mr. Johnson. Who taught you to play like that? No one, Ms. Reynolds. Marcus fought to keep his voice steady. I started teaching myself when I was 7. My father found a violin at a pawn shop. She laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. A pawn shop violin. And I suppose you learned proper bow technique by osmosis? Her words stung, but Marcus had endured worse. YouTube tutorials. And there's a violinist at church who gave me tips sometimes. I practice 4 hours every day. 4 hours? Her eyebrows arched in disbelief. And yet you can't manage to sit properly for my 45-minute class? Marcus's eyes dropped to the floor. The shame of that day burned through him again, the baton striking his back 3 times as classmates watched in shock. The pain had been bad, but the humiliation was worse. His father had wanted to file a complaint, but Marcus had begged him not to. They couldn't afford trouble, his father worked 2 jobs just to keep their apartment. I can't sit for long periods, he finally said, the admission costing him. Not since. Since what, Mr. Johnson? Her voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Since you hit me, he said quietly. It still hurts sometimes. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps even concern, before hardening again. Don't be dramatic. I tapped you with my baton after you repeatedly disrupted my class. If you had a medical issue, you should have brought a doctor's note. Marcus felt a rare flash of anger break through his fear. We can't afford a doctor for something like this. My dad works 60 hours a week, and we still barely make rent. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He never talked about their financial situation. It was nobody's business, especially not Ms. Reynolds. The silence that followed felt endless. Then the music room door creaked open, revealing Mr. Wilson, the school janitor. His kind eyes took in the scene, understanding immediately from the tension in the room. Everything all right in here? He asked, his deep voice gentle but firm. Ms. Reynolds straightened. Fine, James. Mr. Johnson was just leaving after borrowing school property without permission. Mr. Wilson's gaze moved to Marcus, then to the violin case. That true, son? Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. I heard someone playing when I was buffing the hallway, Mr. Wilson continued, his eyes never leaving Marcus. Sounded like Tchaikovsky. Beautiful interpretation. Ms. Reynolds' mouth tightened. You know classical music, James? Something passed across the janitor's weathered face, pride, perhaps, or amusement. I know a thing or two, Ms. Reynolds. He turned back to Marcus. You should get home, son. It's getting late. Grateful for the interruption, Marcus edged toward the door, but Ms. Reynolds wasn't finished. This isn't over, Mr. Johnson. I want you in Principal Chen's office tomorrow morning. We'll discuss your unauthorized use of school instruments and your apparent inability to sit in my class. Her eyes narrowed. And I'd like to hear more about this self-taught genius story of yours. Marcus nodded, his stomach twisting with anxiety. As he hurried past Mr. Wilson, the janitor placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. That was some playing, son, he said quietly. Don't let anyone dim your light. The words followed Marcus as he rushed down the darkening hallway, both a comfort and a burden. Music was his escape, his joy, his dream. But now it had exposed him to the very person who had already caused him so much pain. Tomorrow would bring a reckoning, and Marcus didn't know if he was strong enough to face it. That night, Marcus sat at the small kitchen table in the apartment he shared with his father, pushing food around his plate. The overhead light flickered intermittently, another thing they couldn't afford to fix this month. You're quiet tonight, Elijah Johnson observed, his work-roughened hands cradling a mug of tea. Despite working a morning shift at the warehouse and an evening shift as a security guard, Elijah always made time for dinner with his son. Something happened at school. Marcus hesitated. His father had enough burdens without adding this one. But they had a rule, no secrets. Ms. Reynolds caught me playing in the music room after school. Elijah's expression darkened. The same teacher who hit you? She wants me to meet with Principal Chen tomorrow. Marcus finally looked up, meeting his father's concerned gaze. She doesn't believe I taught myself to play. A sad smile crossed Elijah's tired face. She doesn't know you like I do. The memory surfaced between them without words. Marcus at 7, wide-eyed as his father presented him with a battered violin from Hal's pawn shop. It had cost 3 days' wages, but Elijah had seen how his son stared through the music store window on their bus route. Your mother loved violin music, Elijah had explained, showing Marcus a yellowed photograph of a beautiful woman holding a violin. Lydia Johnson had died when Marcus was just 2, leaving behind only photographs and the music she'd loved. What followed were years of sacrifice and determination. No formal lessons, those were far beyond their means, but Marcus devoured every free resource he could find. He practiced in their bathroom because the acoustics were better, often late into the night with a mute on the bridge to avoid disturbing neighbors. While other kids played video games, Marcus watched grainy YouTube tutorials. While his father worked double shifts, Marcus played until his fingers blistered, then calloused. You get it from her, Elijah said now, pulling Marcus back to the present. That gift. Ms. Reynolds doesn't think it's a gift. She thinks I'm lying. Elijah reached across the table, his hand covering his son's. People like her, they don't understand people like us. They can't imagine learning without some expensive teacher, because that's their world. What should I do tomorrow? You play for them, Elijah said simply. Play like you play for your mother's photograph. Play your truth. Later, as Marcus lay in bed, the weight of tomorrow's confrontation pressed down on him. He thought about Ms. Reynolds' elegant clothes and confident manner, everything about her conveyed privilege and authority. How could someone like her ever understand what it meant to want something so badly you teach yourself in a bathroom, with bleeding fingers and no proper training? His back throbbed, a persistent reminder of the consequences of crossing her. But beneath the pain, a quiet determination took root. His father was right. All he had was his truth. Tomorrow, he would play it. Principal Diana Chen's office was deliberately intimidating. Awards and diplomas lined the walls, the desk was imposingly large, and the chairs arranged so visitors sat lower than she did. Marcus perched uncomfortably on the edge of his seat, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate his back. Ms. Reynolds sat primly beside him, her posture perfect as always. So, Principal Chen began, her manicured fingers steepled, Ms. Reynolds tells me you were found using school instruments without permission after hours. Before Marcus could respond, Ms. Reynolds interjected. There's more to it than that, Diana. He was playing Tchaikovsky. Quite well, actually. Her admission seemed physically painful. He claims to be self-taught. Principal Chen's eyebrows rose. She was known for her focus on the school's prestige, its music program in particular had won regional recognition under her leadership. Is this true, Marcus? Yes, ma'am. His voice came out smaller than he intended. And you never mentioned this talent because... Marcus shifted, wincing. I just play for myself. It's personal. Ms. Reynolds made a skeptical sound. What's personal is that he refuses to sit during my class, disrupting the learning environment. Marcus saw his opening. I can't sit comfortably since the incident with Ms. Reynolds' baton, he said quietly but firmly. It left bruises. The principal's expression hardened as she looked between them. Baton? A tap for discipline, Ms. Reynolds said dismissively. He was being disruptive. It was more than a tap, Marcus countered, finding courage. My back was bruised for weeks. A tense silence filled the office. Principal Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. Ms. Reynolds, we'll discuss this separately. For now, she turned to Marcus, I'm more interested in this hidden musical talent. Our spring showcase is in 2 weeks. If you're as good as Ms. Reynolds reluctantly suggests, perhaps you should perform. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. I don't perform, Marcus stammered. I just play for myself. Then consider this an assignment, Ms. Reynolds said, a calculating gleam in her eye. Prove your abilities before the music department faculty. If you're truly as talented as you claim, we can discuss special arrangements for your seating situation. Marcus recognized the trap. She expected him to fail, to prove himself a fraud. Then his complaints about her would seem like simple retaliation. When? He asked, heart pounding. This Friday. 4 o'clock. The auditorium. Ms. Reynolds' smile didn't reach her eyes. I'll assemble the department. As Marcus left the office, his legs felt weak. For days to prepare for a formal audition before trained musicians who would be looking for every flaw, every indication that he wasn't what he claimed to be. And standing in the hallway, watching him with undisguised contempt, was Tyler Brooks, Ms. Reynolds' star pupil and the wealthy son of the school board president. Somehow, he already knew. Better start packing up, charity case, Tyler sneered. Once everyone sees what a fake you are, you'll be finished at Roosevelt. Marcus spent his lunch period hiding in the back of the library, anxiety churning in his stomach. Word had spread quickly. By noon, it seemed the entire school knew about Friday's showdown in the auditorium. Mind if I join you? Marcus looked up to find Mr. Wilson standing beside his table, a brown paper bag in his weathered hands. The janitor sat without waiting for a response, his knees cracking slightly as he lowered himself into the chair. Not hungry? Mr. Wilson nodded toward Marcus's untouched sandwich. Can't eat, Marcus admitted. Too nervous about Friday. Mr. Wilson unwrapped his own sandwich thoughtfully. Ms. Reynolds putting you through the ringer, huh? She thinks I'm lying. Everyone does. I don't. Mr. Wilson took a bite, chewed thoroughly before continuing. I heard you play, remember? That wasn't the sound of a liar. Something in his tone made Marcus look closer at the older man. Mr. Wilson had worked at Roosevelt for as long as anyone could remember. Students barely noticed him as he moved through the hallways with his mop and cart. But now, watching him, Marcus sensed there was more to the janitor than he'd previously thought. You know about music, Marcus said slowly. Really know, I mean. A smile creased Mr. Wilson's face. I should hope so. Spent 15 years with the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra before my hands gave out. He flexed his fingers, showing the slight tremor. Rheumatoid arthritis. Career ending for a cellist. Marcus stared in disbelief. You were a professional musician? First chair cellist, Mr. Wilson nodded. Until I couldn't be anymore. Life takes unexpected turns, son. Why are you working as a janitor? Health insurance, he said simply. And I like being around music, even if I can't make it anymore. Schools have music programs. Seemed like a good fit. He studied Marcus for a moment. Now, what are you planning to play on Friday? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Something to prove I can actually play, I guess. Mr. Wilson shook his head. Wrong approach. You need to play something that shows not just technical skill, but interpretation. Something that speaks to who you are. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed repertoire options. As the bell rang, Mr. Wilson made an offer that left Marcus speechless. Meet me in practice room B after school. I can't help with your technique at this point, but I can help you prepare mentally. Performance anxiety is real, and you've never played for an audience before. That afternoon, their work began. Mr. Wilson coached not on fingering or bowing, too late to change your fundamentals now, but on breathing, focus, and performance psychology. Playing alone in a room is different from playing with judging eyes on you, he explained. We need to simulate that pressure. The next day, Marcus returned to find 3 custodial staff seated in the practice room, ready to be his test audience. The day after, there were 5 people, including 2 students from the jazz band who'd heard rumors and approached Mr. Wilson. The small audience forced Marcus to confront his nerves, to play through the trembling in his hands and the pain in his back. Each time he faltered, Mr. Wilson had him start again, pushing him to find that mental space where nothing existed but the music. Throughout it all, Tyler Brooks increased his campaign of intimidation. Hey, fraud, he called in the hallway. My father says if you embarrass the music department, they might reconsider your scholarship. Marcus didn't bother correcting him. He wasn't on scholarship, his father paid tuition through endless overtime and careful budgeting. But the threat lingered. The Brooks family had influence. If Tyler's father decided Marcus was a problem. On Thursday afternoon, during their final practice session, Marcus finally broke down. I can't do this, he confessed, setting down the violin. Ms. Reynolds is right, I'm not trained. I'm just a kid who taught himself in a bathroom. They'll tear me apart. Mr. Wilson regarded him calmly. You know what the difference is between you and someone with formal training? Everything. Proper technique, music theory, professional instruction. Documentation, Mr. Wilson interrupted. That's all. You have the knowledge, you just acquired it differently. And you have something many trained musicians lack, genuine passion and personal connection to the music. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Tomorrow, play your truth. Not for Ms. Reynolds, not for Tyler Brooks or his father, for yourself. And for whatever drove a 7-year-old boy to teach himself one of the most difficult instruments in the world. Marcus nodded, drawing strength from the old musician's confidence. Tomorrow would come, ready or not. All he could do was play his truth and face the consequences. Friday arrived with merciless speed. By 4th period, Marcus could barely concentrate on his classes. The pain in his back flared with his anxiety, a burning reminder of what was at stake. At 3:45, he slipped into the bathroom to change into the button-down shirt his father had ironed that morning, their one concession to the formality of the occasion. In the mirror, Marcus barely recognized himself. The worried eyes and tight jaw belonged to a stranger. Just like we practiced, he whispered to his reflection. The auditorium was unsettlingly quiet when Marcus entered at 3:55. On the stage, 7 chairs were arranged in a semicircle, the entire music department faculty. Ms. Reynolds sat in the center, her expression neutral. Principal Chen occupied a seat in the front row, tablet in hand, clearly there to document whatever happened. What Marcus hadn't expected were the students, at least 30 of them scattered throughout the auditorium. Tyler Brooks sat prominently in the second row, surrounded by his usual entourage, a smirk firmly in place. Mr. Wilson stood at the back, arms crossed, his presence a silent encouragement. "Mr. Johnson," Ms. Reynolds called, her voice echoing. "You may begin whenever you're ready. Please introduce your piece first." Marcus walked slowly to center stage, violin case in hand. The spotlights were blinding, making the audience mere shadows beyond their glare. He swallowed hard, fighting the urge to run. "I'll be playing the first movement of Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. A murmur rippled through the faculty. Ms. Reynolds' eyebrows rose fractionally. It was an ambitious choice, a cornerstone of the violin repertoire, technically demanding and emotionally complex. Marcus positioned himself, fighting against the pain in his back to find a stance that would allow him the necessary movement. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself as Mr. Wilson had taught him. "Remember, the first 30 seconds are the hardest," the old cellist had advised. "Get through those, and you'll find your flow." The bow touched the strings. The opening notes wavered slightly, betraying his nerves. Marcus saw Ms. Reynolds lean forward, a hint of satisfaction in her expression. She was waiting for him to fail. Then something shifted. The music took over, just as it always did when he played alone in empty classrooms or in his bathroom at home. His fingers found their positions without conscious thought. The bow moved with the fluid grace of thousands of hours of practice. The Mendelssohn soared through the auditorium, passionate, technically precise, and infused with an emotional quality that came from somewhere deep within him. Marcus played with his eyes closed, swaying slightly with the music, lost in the world it created. When the final notes of the movement faded, the silence that followed was absolute. Marcus opened his eyes, suddenly aware again of the pain in his back, the sweat on his brow, the audience before him. For a terrible moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, from the back of the auditorium, Mr. Wilson began to applaud. The sound was joined by others, students first, then several faculty members, rising to their feet. The applause built, filling the space with a thunderous approval. Only Ms. Reynolds remained seated, her face unreadable. Principal Chen was already on her phone, speaking rapidly, her eyes never leaving Marcus. As Marcus lowered his violin, he caught Tyler Brooks' expression, shock mixed with something that might have been grudging respect. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had expected skepticism, criticism, perhaps even mockery. Instead, the audience continued to applaud, some calling out, "Bravo," and "Encore." Ms. Reynolds finally stood, raising a hand for silence. The applause reluctantly died away. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "That will be all for now." As Marcus packed up his violin with trembling hands, he heard Principal Chen's voice, "Victoria, a word please." In private. He left the stage to whispers and stares, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Something had changed, but he didn't yet know what it meant or where it would lead. Mr. Wilson met him at the stage door, his weathered face split by a wide grin. "You played your truth, son," he said simply. And nobody could deny it. The weekend passed in a blur of calls and messages. Word of Marcus's performance spread rapidly through the school community. Students who had never spoken to him suddenly knew his name. Several approached him on social media, expressing amazement and asking questions about his musical background. By Monday morning, Marcus had become a reluctant celebrity at Roosevelt High. As he walked through the hallways, conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers followed. "There he is, the violin guy. I heard Juilliard's already interested. How'd we not know he could play like that?" The attention was overwhelming for someone who had spent years deliberately avoiding notice. Even Tyler Brooks gave him a wide berth, the usual taunts noticeably absent. But the person Marcus most expected to hear from, Ms. Reynolds, remained silent. She wasn't in school on Monday, her classes covered by substitutes. "Performance evaluation meetings," the substitute explained vaguely when asked. On Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was called to Principal Chen's office. He entered cautiously, surprised to find Mr. Wilson already seated inside. Marcus, please sit down, Principal Chen gestured to an empty chair. Her expression was uncharacteristically gentle. How's your back today? The question caught him off guard. It's better, I guess. Good. I've asked Mr. Wilson to join us because he's been mentoring you, I understand. Mr. Wilson nodded. Just some performance coaching. Principal Chen folded her hands on her desk. Marcus, I want to apologize to you on behalf of Roosevelt High. What happened with Ms. Reynolds, the incident with the baton, should never have occurred. Marcus stared at her, speechless. We've launched a formal investigation. Ms. Reynolds is on administrative leave pending its completion. I didn't ask for that, Marcus said quickly. I don't want anyone to lose their job because of me. This isn't because of you, Principal Chen corrected. This is because of actions Ms. Reynolds took that violated our code of conduct. Actions that, according to our preliminary investigation, may not have been isolated incidents. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. Other students have come forward, he explained gently. Your performance gave them courage. Marcus absorbed this information slowly. What happens now? Several things, Principal Chen said. First, we're creating accommodations for your back pain while you heal, a standing desk in your classes, modified PE requirements, and access to the nurse's office for pain management as needed. She slid a document across the desk. Second, I'd like your father to consider this. It's information about pursuing legal action regarding your injury, should you choose to. The school will not contest such action. We don't want to sue anyone, Marcus protested. We can't afford lawyers anyway. These would be pro bono services, Principal Chen explained. And the decision is entirely yours. But what happened was wrong, and there should be accountability. She paused, then continued more gently. Finally, there's the matter of your musical education. Your talent is extraordinary, Marcus. It shouldn't go undeveloped because of financial constraints. Mr. Wilson picked up the thread. I've reached out to some old colleagues. There's a violinist at the Community Music Academy who's interested in working with you, scholarship basis. Really? For the first time, hope flickered in Marcus's chest. Really, Principal Chen confirmed. And there's more. But I think that information should wait for Ms. Reynolds herself to share. At Marcus's confused look, she added, she's requested a meeting with you and your father. Tomorrow, if possible. Despite everything, I believe she has something important to offer. That night, Marcus told his father everything. Elijah Johnson listened quietly, his expression solemn. Do you want to meet with her? He asked when Marcus finished. I don't know, Marcus admitted. Part of me never wants to see her again. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. That's your right. But sometimes, son, the hardest conversations are the most important ones. What would Mom have done? It was a question Marcus rarely asked, but in moments of difficulty, he often wondered about the woman who had given him her musical gift. A sad smile crossed Elijah's face. Your mother believed in second chances. But she also believed in standing your ground. So we'll go? Marcus asked. We'll go, his father confirmed. Together. And we'll listen. That doesn't mean we have to accept whatever she offers. The next day, they sat in Principal Chen's office, waiting. When Ms. Reynolds finally entered, Marcus was struck by how different she looked. Her usual perfect posture seemed diminished somehow, her confident demeanor replaced by something more tentative. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, taking the seat opposite them. For the first time since Marcus had known her, Victoria Reynolds looked uncertain. Before anything else, Ms. Reynolds began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge, I need to apologize to you, Marcus. She took a breath. What I did was inexcusable. Using physical discipline against a student is wrong, regardless of the circumstances. But more than that, I fail to see you, truly see you, as a person with extraordinary gifts. Marcus sat silently, his father's steady presence beside him a source of strength. Ms. Reynolds' apology seemed genuine, but years of dismissal and that one brutal moment with the baton weren't easily erased. "I understand if you can't forgive me," she continued when he didn't respond. "I'm not asking for that. But I am asking for a chance to help correct the damage I've done, both to your back and to your musical development." She placed a folder on the table between them. "After your performance, I contacted an old colleague at Juilliard. Her name is Elizabeth Carter. She's one of the most respected violin instructors in the country." Elijah leaned forward slightly. "And why would this person be interested in my son?" "Because I sent her the recording of Marcus's performance." Marcus's head snapped up. "You recorded it?" Principal Chin did, as part of the documentation. "With her permission, I forwarded it to Elizabeth." Ms. Reynolds opened the folder, revealing a letter on Juilliard letterhead. She was impressed doesn't begin to cover it. She used the word extraordinary. Elijah took the letter, reading it carefully. His expression remained neutral, but Marcus could see the slight trembling of his hands. "Mrs. Carter is coming to evaluate you personally next month," Ms. Reynolds explained. "If things go well, and I have every reason to believe they will, she wants to offer you a place in Juilliard's pre-college division program." The words hung in the air, too enormous for Marcus to fully comprehend. Juilliard. The dream he had never allowed himself to have. "There would be a full scholarship," Ms. Reynolds added, correctly reading the concern in Elijah's eyes. "And I've taken the liberty of researching transportation options. There's a weekend bus that goes directly from here to New York." Marcus found his voice at last. "Why are you doing this?" The question seemed to catch Ms. Reynolds off guard. She looked down at her clasped hands. "Because I was wrong," she said simply. "I was so convinced that musical excellence could only come through traditional pathways, the ones I followed, that I couldn't recognize true talent when it was right in front of me. And worse, I punished it." She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. "I became a music teacher because I believe music transforms lives. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. You reminded me." A long silence followed. Finally, Elijah spoke. "This opportunity sounds remarkable. We're grateful for it." His tone was measured, neither accepting nor rejecting. "But there's still the matter of the harm done to my son." Ms. Reynolds nodded solemnly. "Yes. I understand you've been given information about legal options. I won't contest any action you decide to take. I've already submitted my resignation to the board, effective at the end of the school year." "You're quitting?" Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "I'm stepping away to reassess," she corrected gently. "What happened with you has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about my teaching philosophy and methods. I need time to reflect and change." As they left the office 30 minutes later, Marcus felt strangely hollow. The pain in his back seemed less significant compared to the emotional whiplash of the past week, from hidden violinist to school celebrity, from Ms. Reynolds' victim to her redemption project. "What do you think?" he asked his father as they walked to the bus stop. Elijah considered the question carefully. "I think opportunities like Juilliard don't come along often for kids like you, for families like ours. But I also think accepting help from someone who hurt you is complicated." He placed an arm around Marcus's shoulders. "You don't have to decide today. Mrs. Carter isn't coming for a month. Take some time." That night, Marcus took out his violin and played softly, working through his conflicted feelings in the language that made the most sense to him. The music flowed from someplace deep inside, a wordless exploration of pain, opportunity, fear, and possibility. When he finished, he found his father standing in the doorway, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your mother would be so proud," Elijah said softly. "Whatever you decide about Juilliard, about Ms. Reynolds, she would be proud of the musician you become without anyone's help but your own." In that moment, Marcus knew what his decision would be. The community music center was housed in a converted church, its stained glass windows casting multicolored patterns across the worn wooden floors. Marcus sat on a bench in the main hallway, violin case balanced on his knees, watching students of all ages move between practice rooms. Nervous? Mr. Wilson settled beside him, Sunday suit pressed and tie slightly crooked. A little, Marcus admitted. I've never had a real lesson before. 2 weeks had passed since the meeting with Ms. Reynolds. After careful consideration, Marcus had accepted the opportunity to study with Mrs. Carter when she visited next month. In the meantime, Mr. Wilson had arranged for him to begin lessons at the community center with a former colleague. Professor Taylor is tough but fair, Mr. Wilson assured him. He'll identify the gaps in your technique without dismissing what you've accomplished on your own. Marcus nodded, grateful yet again for the old cellist's guidance. In the aftermath of his performance, Mr. Wilson had become a steadying presence, part mentor, part advocate, steering him through the sudden attention and opportunities. Have you spoken to Ms. Reynolds since the meeting? Mr. Wilson asked carefully. No. Marcus fidgeted with the clasp on his case. I'm not ready. Understandable. Mr. Wilson's voice held no judgment. Forgiveness isn't something anyone can rush you into. The door at the end of the hallway opened, and a tall black man with silver-streaked dreadlocks emerged. You must be Marcus, he called, waving them over. James has told me all about you. Professor Taylor's studio was small but welcoming, walls lined with photographs of orchestras and students, shelves overflowing with worn music books. He listened intently as Marcus played, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful. Remarkable, he said when Marcus finished the piece. Your intuitive understanding of phrasing is extraordinary. Now, he picked up his own violin, let me show you some technical adjustments that will save your wrists over time. For the next hour, Marcus absorbed more formal instruction than he'd received in his entire life. Professor Taylor was direct but encouraging, correcting without criticism, praising genuine strengths while addressing weaknesses. You've done amazingly well on your own, he concluded. But no musician is an island. Even the greats have teachers, colleagues, mentors. There's no shame in accepting guidance. The words lingered with Marcus as he and Mr. Wilson rode the bus back to his neighborhood. No musician is an island. Perhaps the same was true for healing. 3 days later, Marcus found himself standing outside Ms. Reynolds' classroom after school hours. Through the window, he could see her at her desk, head bowed over papers, looking smaller somehow than he remembered. He knocked softly. The surprise on her face when she saw him was genuine. Marcus. Come in, please. He entered cautiously, violin case clutched like a shield. I've been thinking about your apology, he began, the words rehearsed but sincere. And about Juilliard. Yes. Her voice was carefully neutral. I'm going to accept the audition with Mrs. Carter. He took a breath. And I'd like you to help me prepare, if that offer still stands. Ms. Reynolds sat very still. It does, she said quietly. But may I ask why? You have every reason to want nothing to do with me. Marcus considered the question. The answer had come to him during his lesson with Professor Taylor, watching the older musician demonstrate techniques with obvious joy in sharing knowledge. Because you were wrong about how I learned to play, but you weren't wrong about everything, he said slowly. There are gaps in my technique. Things I couldn't teach myself. And you know those things. He straightened, meeting her eyes directly. This doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened. It means I'm choosing not to let it stop me from becoming the best musician I can be. I understand, she said, and for perhaps the first time, Marcus believed she truly did. When would you like to begin? My back is better now, Marcus said. I can sit for lessons. Mondays and Wednesdays after school would work. The flash of shame that crossed her face at the mention of his back was visible but quickly controlled. I'll make that work. She hesitated, then added, I've been researching better teaching methods. For students with different backgrounds and learning styles. It's been illuminating. Marcus nodded, acknowledging her effort without dismissing what had happened. I have a condition, though. Of course. Anything. There's a fourth-grade boy in the after-school program. Dion Williams. He hangs around the music room sometimes, watching the older kids. I've seen him trying to play instruments when no one's looking. Ms. Reynolds frowned slightly, recognition dawning. Small boy. Always wearing a blue hoodie. That's him. He reminds me of myself at that age. I want you to offer him free lessons. He can't afford them otherwise. The request hung between them, a challenge, a chance at redemption, a bridge across broken trust. I'll speak to his parents tomorrow, Ms. Reynolds said finally. Thank you for the opportunity. As Marcus left the classroom, he felt something rigid within him begin to loosen. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps its precursor, the possibility that pain could transform into purpose. That sometimes, the people who hurt us might also help heal us, if we're brave enough to allow it. That night, he practiced with renewed focus, his father watching proudly from the doorway. The Tchaikovsky concerto flowed from his violin, no longer a secret indulgence but a declaration of who he was and who he might become. The month passed in a whirlwind of preparation. 3 times a week, Marcus worked with Ms. Reynolds after school, refining his technique. The sessions were initially tense, both of them navigating the complicated new dynamic. But gradually, as the focus remained firmly on the music, a cautious professional respect developed. Your left-hand vibrato is intuitive but inconsistent, she noted during their second week. Let's work on control and variation. Marcus absorbed everything: proper bow distribution, refined fingering, dynamics, musical theory. Ms. Reynolds proved to be a knowledgeable and surprisingly patient teacher when she set aside her assumptions and focused on his specific needs. On Saturdays, he studied with Professor Taylor at the community center, who approached the same technical challenges from different angles, giving Marcus a broader understanding. And twice a week, Mr. Wilson listened to his run-throughs, offering performance guidance. Mrs. Carter won't just be evaluating your playing, he explained. She'll be watching how you handle pressure, how you respond to direction, whether you can take criticism without breaking. Through it all, Marcus's father worked extra shifts to ensure he could take the day off for Mrs. Carter's visit. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Elijah insisted when Marcus protested. The day before the audition, Ms. Reynolds kept him after their session. I want you to know, she said carefully, that regardless of what happens tomorrow, you've already accomplished something remarkable. Not just your playing, but your character. Marcus nodded, still not entirely comfortable with personal conversations between them. I've been working with Dion, she added. He has a good ear. Natural rhythm. His mother said he's been sleeping with the loner violin beside his bed. A small smile crossed Marcus's face. I used to do that too. The morning of the audition dawned clear and bright. Marcus had barely slept, running passages in his mind throughout the night. His father made a special breakfast, then helped him dress in their best clothes: pressed slacks, a button-down shirt borrowed from a cousin, and a tie inherited from his grandfather. You look like a professional, Elijah said proudly, straightening the tie. They arrived at Roosevelt High an hour early. The auditorium had been prepared with care, stage swept and polished, a single chair positioned center stage, music stands arranged for accompanists. Principal Chen bustled about, checking details, uncharacteristically nervous. Mrs. Carter's flight landed 20 minutes ago, she informed them. Ms. Reynolds is picking her up at the airport now. Mr. Wilson appeared in his formal suit, patting Marcus's shoulder reassuringly. Professor Taylor arrived shortly after, nodding encouragingly. At exactly 10 o'clock, the auditorium doors opened. Ms. Reynolds entered, followed by a slender woman with silver hair cut in a precise bob. Elizabeth Carter carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove to anyone. Introductions were made, hands shaken. Mrs. Carter's handshake was firm, her gaze direct as she assessed Marcus. I've watched your recording several times, she said, her voice carrying the faint traces of a British accent. Very impressive for someone without formal training. Today, I'd like to see how you handle direction and adjustment. She gestured to the stage. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Johnson. Begin with the Bach partita, if you please. Marcus ascended the steps, acutely aware of every eye upon him. His father sat in the front row, pride evident in his face. Mr. Wilson and Professor Taylor positioned themselves on either side, silent support. As he lifted his violin to his shoulder, a strange calm settled over him. This moment, standing before a Juilliard instructor, preparing to play Bach, would have seemed impossible just months ago. Yet here he was, transformed by circumstances both painful and providential. The Bach flowed from his instrument, clean and precise. When he finished, Mrs. Carter nodded thoughtfully. Now, let's try something. Play the opening again, but with less vibrato on the sustained notes. Think of it as a cleaner, more Baroque approach. Marcus adjusted as requested, surprised by how differently the piece sounded with this simple change. Good, Mrs. Carter said. Now, once more, but with attention to the implied counterpoint in measures 5 through 8. For over an hour, she worked with him, requesting adjustments, suggesting interpretations, occasionally demonstrating briefly on her own instrument. Marcus absorbed every comment, adapting quickly, answering her music theory questions with growing confidence. Finally, she set down her notes. I'd like to speak with Marcus alone, if that's acceptable. The others filed out, leaving Marcus facing Mrs. Carter across the empty auditorium. You have a gift, she said simply. More importantly, you have discipline and adaptability. Your technique needs refinement, but your musicality is innate. She leaned forward slightly. Juilliard's pre-college division is highly competitive. The students there have typically been studying with private instructors since they were very young. It will be challenging for you to catch up technically. Marcus nodded, heart sinking slightly. However, she continued, I believe you have something many of them don't, a unique voice and perspective. Music isn't merely about technical proficiency, it's about communication, emotion, connection. She smiled then, the expression warming her entire face. I would very much like to offer you a place in our program, Mr. Johnson. Full scholarship, beginning this fall. The words took a moment to register. When they did, Marcus felt tears threatening. Really, he managed. Really. She stood, extending her hand. Welcome to Juilliard, Marcus. I believe you'll make us proud. 1 year later, Marcus adjusted his bow tie, still not entirely comfortable in the formal attire required for Juilliard recitals. The backstage area hummed with the nervous energy of young musicians, each lost in their pre-performance rituals. 5 minutes, Mr. Johnson, the stage manager called. Marcus nodded, closing his eyes to center himself as Mr. Wilson had taught him. So much had changed in a year. Weekends now found him in New York, living in a Juilliard residence hall, studying with some of the finest musicians in the world. Weekdays, he attended Roosevelt High, where Ms. Reynolds continued to work with him, her teaching methods transformed along with their relationship. The incident with the baton had led to systemic changes at Roosevelt. Dr. Williams, the superintendent, had implemented a district-wide review of disciplinary practices. Ms. Reynolds, rather than resigning, had enrolled in a teaching methodology program focused on diverse learning styles and trauma-informed education. Most significantly for Marcus, his back had fully healed, both physically and metaphorically. The pain that had once defined his school experience had faded, replaced by a newfound confidence in his musical identity. A gentle hand on his shoulder interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find his father, looking distinguished in a borrowed suit. Nervous? Elijah asked. Marcus smiled. A little. There are a lot of people out there. Including someone who came a long way to hear you play. Marcus followed his father's gaze to where Ms. Reynolds stood awkwardly at the edge of the backstage area. She had driven 3 hours to attend this recital, her first visit to Juilliard since he begun the program. Their eyes met, and she gave him a small, tentative smile. Marcus nodded in acknowledgement, silently accepting her presence as part of his journey. Not quite forgiveness, but a recognition that in the complex tapestry of his life, even painful threads had contributed to the whole. 2 minutes, the stage manager announced. "I'll take my seat," Elijah said, hugging his son briefly. "Your mother would be so proud." As Marcus stepped onto the stage, violin in hand, the spotlights momentarily blinded him. When his vision cleared, he saw the audience, his father in the front row, Mr. Wilson beside him, Professor Taylor and Principal Chen a few rows back. Ms. Reynolds sitting alone near the aisle, her expression a mixture of pride and lingering regret. And in the center of the audience, Mrs. Carter, now his primary instructor, who had opened doors he never knew existed. Marcus positioned his violin and began to play, not Tchaikovsky or Mendelssohn this time, but an original composition. Transformation in E minor, he had titled it, a piece that began in darkness and pain but evolved into something hopeful and transcendent. As the music filled the recital hall, Marcus reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. A teacher's cruelty had led, through unexpected pathways, to opportunity. Pain had opened doors to healing. And music, always music, had been his constant, carrying him through the darkest moments toward a future bright with possibility. When the final notes faded, the audience rose in unanimous applause. Marcus bowed, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. In that moment of triumph, he remembered the frightened boy playing alone in an empty classroom, and silently promised him, "This is just the beginning." Dear friend, this story reminds us that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. Behind every difficult student might be an untold story of struggle, passion, and extraordinary potential waiting to be discovered. As viewers, we have the power to recognize and nurture the gifts in those around us, especially in communities where formal training remains out of reach for many talented young people. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives that challenge stereotypes and inspire change. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard and create a world where talent is recognized regardless of background. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today.